I was 21 when it happened, and I still don't know how to explain what I saw. There's an old, shut-down psychiatric hospital in the town where I grew up. Gray Hill Asylum. Everyone knew about it. You'd pass it on the way to the lake. This massive stone building with boarded-up windows and vines crawling up the sides. Local kids would dare each other to go inside. Most didn't. I did. It was late October, cold and quiet. My friend Marcus was back in town from college, and we decided to check it out. Stupid, I know. But it felt like one of those things we needed to do before life got serious. We parked off the road a little after midnight. The asylum sat like a skeleton against the cloudy sky. Our breath fogged in the air. We hopped the rusted fence and found a broken window in the side of the building. It was just big enough to squeeze through. Inside, it was pitch black, except for our flashlights. The air was damp, heavy, like a basement that hadn't been opened in decades. The floor was littered with broken glass and pieces of wood. I remember stepping on something that cracked, and when I looked down, it was an old pair of glasses. The lenses were shattered. We explored the hallways, shining our lights into rooms that were mostly empty, except for rotting beds and peeling wallpaper. Some rooms had patient records scattered across the floor. I picked one up. It had a name and a photo stapled to it. The eyes in that photo didn't look right. I dropped it. At some point, we came across a stairwell leading to the basement. Marcus looked at me and grinned like it was the best part of the night. I didn't feel the same, but I followed. The steps creaked under us, and the air down there was worse, thicker, like breathing through a wet rag. The basement was darker than the rest of the place, and colder too. We passed by rooms with rusted metal beds, restraint chairs, and strange markings on the walls. Some of the doors had old metal locks on them. Others were hanging off their hinges. Then we came to one door that was perfectly intact. It was pale green, with a tiny window at eye level, and it had a sliding panel on the outside. There were no markings on it, no room number, no label, just that one single door at the end of the hall. We stood in front of it, and Marcus whispered, "Should we open it?" I didn't answer because I was already walking backward. I didn't want to be near that door. I don't know why. There was just this feeling, like something was awake behind it, and it knew we were there. But Marcus, of course, reached for the handle. It didn't budge. He tried pulling harder, but it was locked. Then he slid open the little metal viewing panel, like you'd see in a prison door. He froze. I asked him what he saw. He didn't answer, just stood there. I walked back over and looked through the panel. The room was dark, but not completely. There was a dim, flickering light coming from a bare bulb on the ceiling. The walls were lined with padding, like a solitary confinement cell. And in the corner, there was someone sitting there. Not a figure, not a shape I imagined. A real person, crouched in the corner, knees to chest, arms wrapped around them. They weren't moving, just staring directly at the door. At us. Their eyes were wide open, too wide. And they looked wet, like they'd been crying for hours. Their mouth was slightly open, and I swear I could see them breathing. We slammed the panel shut and backed away. "I thought this place was abandoned," Marcus whispered. "It is," I said. "It's been closed for almost 30 years. He shook his head. "Then what the hell is that?" We stood there in silence for a few seconds. Then we heard it. A knock. From the other side of the door. Just one. Slow. Hollow. We ran. I've never run so fast in my life. We practically flew up the stairs, through the halls, back out the window, and into the car. The whole time I felt like someone was right behind me, like if I looked over my shoulder, I'd see those same wide, unblinking eyes. We didn't say anything until we got back to Marcus's driveway. He turned off the car and just sat there, gripping the wheel. Eventually, he said, Maybe it was a squatter or something. But we both knew that wasn't it. The room was locked. The door was sealed from the outside. There was no food, no mattress, no light switch, nothing. Just that one flickering bulb and whoever, or whatever, was sitting in the corner. I never told anyone else about what we saw. Marcus and I never talked about it again, either. It was like some silent agreement. Pretend it didn't happen, but I still think about it, a lot. Especially at night when everything's quiet. That knock, just one. Like someone letting us know they knew we were there. And sometimes, when I close my eyes, I can still see those eyes looking back at me through the glass. Still wide, still wet, still waiting. I never planned to spend a night in an abandoned motel. But sometimes things happen that you don't expect, and looking back, you wonder why you ever went there at all. It was summer, a few years ago. My friends and I were on a road trip, just driving through small towns and stopping wherever we felt like. One night, we were tired and needed a place to sleep. We passed a sign on the highway for an old motel, the Willow Inn. It looked empty. The paint was peeling, the neon sign flickering, weakly. We didn't have much money left, and everything else nearby was either full or way too expensive. So, against better judgment, we decided to check if the motel had any rooms left. When we pulled into the parking lot, it was dead silent. No cars, no people. Just a few broken chairs on the porch. The front office door was locked, but the window was cracked open. I stuck my head in and called out. No answer. We circled the building and found one room with the door unlocked. It was room 7. The door creaked as we pushed it open, and a thick, dusty smell hit us. The air inside felt heavy, like it hadn't been breathed in for years. The room was small and barely furnished. A saggy mattress, a broken lamp, a rusty heater near the window. The window itself was cracked and dirty, letting in the weak light from the street lamp outside. My friends didn't want to stay, but I said we could rest for a few hours. We would leave before dawn. The first few minutes were okay. We laughed about the weird motel and joked about horror movies that happen in places like this. But after a while, the silence started to press on me. It was too quiet. No cars driving by. No bugs outside. Just silence. I decided to check the bathroom. The floor tiles were cracked and sticky. The bathtub had yellow stains, and the faucet leaked a slow drip. I stood there for a moment, staring at my reflection in the cracked mirror above the sink. That's when I heard it. Soft footsteps. At first, I thought it was one of my friends messing around, but the footsteps didn't sound playful. They were slow, careful. Outside the bathroom door, I called out, "Guys, are you in here?" No answer. The footsteps stopped. My heart was beating fast. I opened the bathroom door slowly. The room was empty. I looked out into the hallway. It was dark, the only light coming from the cracked window in the main room. Then I saw it. The door at the end of the hall, the door to room 8, was slightly open. It had been closed before. I told my friends, and we all froze for a moment. Maybe someone's inside, one of them whispered. We weren't sure. Marcus, the bravest one, said he'd check. I wanted to stop him, but he was already walking down the hall, flashlight in hand. The floorboards creaked under his steps. He reached the door, pushed it open wide. The room was empty. No furniture. No signs of anyone. But then we noticed something strange. On the floor, near the corner, were footprints. Bare footprints. They looked fresh. We all looked at each other. Where could someone have come from? The motel only had 2 floors, and this side of the building was boarded up. There were no signs of recent visitors. Suddenly the door slammed shut behind Marcus. We all jumped. I ran down the hall to open it, but it was stuck. I pulled hard, and finally it gave way. Marcus looked shaken. "I didn't see anything," he said, voice low. "But the footprints?" He shrugged. "Maybe the wind moved something." We all wanted to leave, but the front office was still locked, and none of us had our phones charged. We decided to stay in room 7 for the night and figure out a plan in the morning. Around midnight, the strange noises began. It started with a tapping sound from the ceiling, light, like someone knocking with their fingernails. Then, the heater started clicking and groaning, even though it was off. I sat up on the bed, flashlight ready. Suddenly, I heard a faint whisper. I couldn't understand the words. It was like someone was speaking just beyond hearing. "Did you hear that?" I asked. My friends nodded, eyes wide. The whispering grew louder, but still soft. It seemed to come from the walls. I walked over to the window. The street was empty, and still. Then the whisper stopped. For a long time, nothing. Then, footsteps again. Slow, dragging footsteps. Coming from the hall. We held our breath. The door to room 7 creaked open. I shined my flashlight into the hallway. No one was there. But the hallway was darker than before. Like the light had been swallowed. I stepped outside and saw something that froze me. On the floor, leading down the hall, were more footprints. But these were different. They looked smeared. Like someone dragged their feet. I wanted to follow them, but my friends pulled me back. We went back inside, locking the door behind us. I lay on the bed, staring at the ceiling. Then I heard a voice, clear, soft, right next to my ear. "Leave." I snapped my head around. No one. I looked at my friends, but they hadn't heard it. I wasn't sure if I had imagined it. The rest of the night passed in a blur of strange sounds. Tapping, whispers, footsteps. When dawn finally came, we left as fast as we could. We didn't say much on the drive home, but I kept thinking about that voice. Who was there in that motel? Had they been waiting for us? Or had we just disturbed something that should have been left alone? To this day, I don't know what was in that abandoned motel, but sometimes when I'm alone and everything is quiet, I swear I hear a whisper, soft and clear. "Leave." I don't know why I ever went into that school building. It was part of an old, shut-down high school on the edge of town. No one had used it for years, but I'd heard rumors, strange noises, shadows moving behind broken windows. It sounded like the kind of place you shouldn't go. But curiosity got the better of me. It was a Saturday afternoon in late spring. The sun was shining, but the school looked dark and empty, like it was hiding something. I had my backpack, a flashlight, and my phone in case I needed it. I told my parents I was meeting a friend, but really I wanted to see if the stories were true. The main entrance was chained and locked, so I found a side door that was cracked open. It groaned when I pushed it, and a smell hit me right away. The smell of dust, old books, and something sour, like mold mixed with rust. I stepped inside, and the silence was thick. It was the kind of silence that makes your ears ring. The floor was covered with fallen ceiling tiles, broken glass, and papers that looked yellow and brittle. I started walking down the main hallway. The walls were covered in faded paint and peeling posters from years ago. Football games, school dances, lunch menus. I passed the library first. The windows were dusty, but I could see piles of books stacked on the floor inside. I shone my flashlight into the library. It was a mess. Books everywhere. Overturned chairs, a broken window letting in a cold breeze. I saw something moving in the far corner, and my heart jumped. But it was just a rat. I sighed and kept moving. I wanted to get to the classrooms. I had read online that the strangest things happened there. People said they heard voices, footsteps, even doors slamming shut on their own. I found a classroom at the end of the hall. The door was hanging off one hinge. I pushed it open, and the room smelled like dry paper and dust. The desks were covered in graffiti and old stickers. The whiteboard still had faint marks of writing, though years had passed. I walked in and sat down on one of the desks. The floor creaked under me. The sunlight through the cracked windows made long shadows across the room. I was about to get up when I heard a soft tapping behind me. I froze. It sounded like fingernails tapping on wood. I turned slowly. The room was empty. "Hello?" I whispered. No answer. I shrugged and thought maybe it was the wind. Then I heard it again. But this time it was from the closet at the back of the room. I didn't know the classroom had a closet. I walked over, my flashlight shaking in my hand. The closet door was closed. The tapping stopped. I reached out and slowly opened the door. Inside, it was pitch black. The only light was from my flashlight, and it barely reached inside. The shelves were empty, except for a few broken hangers. Suddenly I heard a whisper. I couldn't make out the words. It was soft and low, like someone was breathing right next to me. I stepped back, heart pounding. Then the door slammed shut behind me. I jumped and turned around. The classroom was still empty. I stood there, breathing hard, trying to calm down. Told myself it was just the wind or my imagination, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching me. I looked around the room again. The desks were all facing the front, but the chair across from me was pushed back like someone had just stood up. I didn't move. I wanted to get out, but I felt rooted to the spot. Then I heard footsteps. Slow. Heavy. Coming from the hallway. I called out, "Hello? Is someone there?" The footsteps stopped, then started again. Closer. Closer. I backed up toward the door. My flashlight flickered. I slammed the door shut and locked it with the small latch. I pressed my back against it, heart pounding in my chest. The footsteps stopped, outside. Then, silence. I waited for what felt like hours. Finally, I took out my phone and checked the time. Only 15 minutes had passed. I decided to risk it and opened the door slowly. The hallway was empty. No footsteps, no voices, no sign anyone had been there. I hurried down the hall, my flashlight scanning every shadow. When I reached the main entrance, I found the chain was still locked. I cursed under my breath. Then I heard a noise behind me, a soft dragging sound. I spun around. Nothing. But then I saw the classroom door I had left was wide open. The wind must have blown it. I walked back to close. When I looked inside, I saw something I'll never forget. On the whiteboard, written in faint, scrawled letters, were the words, "Don't leave me." My breath caught. I stared at the words for a long time. Who wrote that? When? I ran out of the building as fast as I could. I never went back. I don't know if it was a prank, or if someone else was in the building before me. But sometimes, late at night, I still see that classroom. I see the empty desks, the cracked window, the dark closet, and I wonder, who was trying to tell me to stay, or was it a warning to never come back? It was a rainy evening when I decided to explore the old apartment building down the street. I'd always been curious about it because it had been empty for years, and the neighbors said it was full of strange sounds and shadows. I didn't believe any of it, but something about the place made me want to see for myself. The building was a small 3-story brick structure with boarded-up windows on the first floor. The paint was chipped, and the front door looked heavy and locked tight. But I found a side entrance where the lock was broken. The door creaked open when I pushed it. Inside, the air was thick and smelled like damp concrete and old smoke. The floor was covered in dirt and trash, and the stairway smelled of mold. I switched on my flashlight and started to climb the stairs. The walls were covered with old wallpaper peeling at the edges. The ceiling was cracked, and I could hear the rain tapping softly on the roof. When I reached the second floor, the hallway was dark and quiet. I opened one of the apartment doors. Inside, the air was colder, and the floorboards groaned beneath my feet. Broken glass was scattered on the floor, and the furniture was covered in thick dust. I moved from room to room, shining my light on the walls, the ceilings, and the broken windows. Then I heard it, a faint sound coming from below. It was like a soft tapping, maybe a finger tapping on wood. Realized the sound was coming from the basement. I didn't see any stairs leading down at first. Then I found a small door at the end of the hall with a heavy padlock on it. The lock was old and rusty. I pulled at it, and it didn't budge. But then I noticed the lock wasn't fully closed. I grabbed a screwdriver from my backpack and tried to pry it open. After a few minutes, it clicked and the door swung open just a crack. A cold draft rushed out, carrying with it a strange, damp smell. It smelled like wet stone and something else I couldn't name. I shined my flashlight down the stairs. The basement was dark, but I could see old wooden shelves lining the walls and boxes piled up in the corners. I thought about going back, but curiosity pushed me forward. I started down the stairs slowly. Each step creaked, echoing in the empty space. The air grew colder as I reached the bottom. Then I saw something that stopped me. On the floor, in front of the stairs, were footprints. Bare footprints. They looked fresh, wet, and muddy. I held my breath. I was alone. Or so I thought. I stepped forward, shining my light on the shelves. Most were empty or covered with dust, but one box was open. Inside were old photographs and papers, yellowed with age. I picked one up. It was a picture of the building from when it was new. People smiling outside, happy families. I put it down and moved to the next box. Suddenly, I heard footsteps above me. Heavy, slow steps. I froze. The footsteps stopped right above the basement door. I held my breath. Then I heard a faint whisper. It sounded like someone was calling my name. Help! My heart pounded. I ran to the stairs and looked up. The door was closed again. I pulled at the handle, but it was locked. Panic hit me. Banged on the door and shouted, but no one answered. The whisper came again, closer this time. Help me. The voice was soft and desperate. I sat down on the cold floor, my back against the wall. I didn't know what to do. Then I heard scratching from the far corner of the basement. I shined my flashlight toward the sound. There was nothing there, just dark shadows. But the scratching grew louder, like nails scraping wood. I wanted to run. I wanted to scream, but I couldn't move. The scratching stopped suddenly. Then silence. I stayed still for what felt like forever. When I finally stood up, I saw something on the wall. Scratches. Deep, long scratches. They looked like letters, but they were hard to read. I tried to make out the words. The last line was clear. Don't leave me here. My blood ran cold. I tried the door again. This time, it gave way. I ran up the stairs and out of the building without looking back. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept hearing the whisper and the scratching. I don't know who or what was in that basement, and I don't want to find out. But sometimes when I walk past the building, I hear faint tapping from below, and I wonder if it's still waiting for someone to come back. A few months ago, I decided to take a short road trip alone. I wanted to clear my head and see some new places. It was late, and I had been driving for hours. My phone was almost dead, and the gas tank was getting low. I needed a place to stay, for the night. I saw an old motel sign glowing dimly in the distance. The motel looked like it had been there forever, a little run down but still open. I pulled in and parked in front of the office. The building was quiet, except for the soft hum of a flickering neon light. I went inside and was greeted by a man behind the counter. He looked tired, maybe in his 60s, with a pale face and small eyes that didn't quite meet mine. "Room for one?" I asked. He nodded slowly and handed me a key on a rusty ring. "Room 7, he said. I took the key and headed toward the room. The hallway smelled like old carpet and cleaning chemicals. The walls had cracks, and the wallpaper was peeling. When I reached the door, I noticed it was heavier than most motel doors I'd seen. I unlocked it and pushed it open. The room was small and dimly lit by a single lamp on the nightstand. The bed looked used but clean. A cracked TV hung on the wall, and the window was covered by heavy curtains. I dropped my bag and turned on the light. The room felt cold, colder than it should for a summer night. I looked around and saw a small bathroom at the back. I went inside and flipped on the light. The mirror was cracked and the sink had a slow drip. I washed my face and looked in the mirror. For a moment I thought I saw something behind me, but when I turned around, the room was empty. I shook it off and went back to the bed. I was about to lie down when I heard a faint noise. It sounded like whispering. I stopped and listened. The sound seemed to come from the wall behind the bed. I pressed my ear against the wall. The whispering stopped. Sat back on the bed, heart beating faster. Maybe it was the wind outside. I tried to fall asleep, but the whispering came again. This time it was clearer. It sounded like someone saying, "Help me." I got up and looked around. There was nothing there. The door was locked. I checked the window, and it was shut tight. I sat back down and stared at the wall. Then I noticed something strange. On the wallpaper behind the bed, there were small scratches, like someone had been trying to claw their way out. I touched the wall and felt rough patches where the paper had been torn. Suddenly, I heard a loud bang from the bathroom. I jumped up and rushed in. The door was closed. I opened it slowly. Inside, the bathtub faucet was dripping fast now, but the weird thing was the shower curtain. It was moving slightly, even though there was no breeze. I pulled back the curtain. The bathtub was empty. I reached in and felt something cold and wet. It was a folded piece of paper. I opened it carefully. The paper was old and stained, with handwriting barely legible. It said, "I'm trapped. Please find me. Room 7. My blood ran cold. How could that be? I was in room 7. Was someone really trapped in here? I checked every corner of the room. Nothing. I tried the closet. It was empty, except for a few old hangers. I sat back down, on the bed, feeling a chill run down my spine. Then the whisper came again, this time louder, more urgent. "Please help." I grabbed my phone to call the front desk, but no signal. I tried again. Nothing. I decided to leave. I unlocked the door, but it wouldn't budge. I pulled harder. The lock was stuck. I was trapped. Panic set in. I banged on the door and shouted for help. No one answered. The whisper turned into a soft moan. The lamp flickered and went out. The room was pitch black. I fumbled for my flashlight. When I turned it on, I saw scratches all over the walls, deep and fresh. They formed words. "Don't leave me." I shivered and sat on the bed, trying to calm down. Minutes passed like hours. Then, I heard footsteps outside the door. Slow, heavy steps. They stopped. I whispered, "Who's there?" No answer. The door handle rattled, but didn't turn. I held my breath. After a while, the footsteps faded away. The whisper stopped. The lamp flickered back on. I tried the door again. This time, it opened easily. I didn't wait. I ran out of the room, down the hallway, and out of the motel. I looked back once. The window in room 7 was open just a crack, and I thought I saw a shadow watching me. I never stayed at another motel alone again. Sometimes I wonder if that room was ever really empty. If the person who wrote that note is still there, waiting.